Hello, I'm Martin and I would like to tell you something about how I started listening to metal music. When I was a child, I was a weirdo and I didn't listen to any pop music. There is one exception. I listened to music from Pokemon movies and Pokemon series, but besides that, I didn't listen to any pop music. I listened to a lot of classical music as a child, and I also listened to some relaxation music and instrumental new age music and things like that. I didn't listen to any rock or pop music during my childhood. I also learned to play several music instruments and I learned a lot of musical theory, so I can tell that my musical background is really good, and the reason why I listen to metal music is not because it's the only music I know, it's not even the only music besides pop music that I know. I really know a lot of music. Before I move to metal music, I will show you what were my most popular CDs when I was 12 years old. Of course, they were the CDs from Pokemon series because I was a huge fan of Pokemon, so even if they didn't have a real musical value, I liked to listen to them because they reminded me of the series and the games, etc. But another example is this CD Sounds of the Universe, which is it's a really weird music. It's not classical music. I can't describe it by any genre. It's a really weird music with weird sounds. I also listened to classical music, as I said, and I can show you my two most favorite CDs of classical music. This is the Novosvětská Symphony by Antonín Dvořák, and this is Johann Sebastian Bach. I liked these two composers a lot. And besides classical music, I also listen to instrumental music like Magic Flute. When I was 14 years old, I discovered Nightwish through my classmate. As you all know, Nightwish is a very popular symphonic metal band, and first I liked their short and simple songs like Nemo or Bye Bye Beautiful, but as I listened to them more and more, I started to like the long epic songs much more, like Ghost Love Score and The Poet and the Pendulum, and I also learned to play The Poet and the Pendulum on piano, but because it's a really long and difficult song, I learned to play only about first 3 or 4 minutes, and even these with some simplifications. Together with Nightwish, I started listening to Tarja because Tarja was not a part of their band anymore when I started listening to Nightwish. And I also liked Tarja, but not so much. I mostly listened to her song I Walk Alone and Phoenix, if I remember correctly, My Little Phoenix or something like that. When I told my friend John Beek about my interest in Nightwish and stuff, he started recommending me a lot of female-fronted metal bands, which I couldn't understand at that age with my previous experience, so I continued listening to Nightwish, Tarja, and I also kept listening to some music I used to listen before, like classical music and the Magic Flute and things like that. Later on, I decided I want to know some other metal music besides Nightwish and Tarja, and I tried listening to some mainstream heavy metal like Manowar and Hammerfall and bands like that. I could understand them, of course. I liked several songs a little, but I couldn't be a fan of them, and later I stopped listening to them. And before I move away from Nightwish, I will show you my favorite Nightwish albums, which I still like a lot. This is Wishmaster, This is the album Once, and this is the album Ocean Words. These three are really great symphonic metal albums. I have also this album Endless Forms, Most Beautiful. It's not that good, but it has one very awesome, very epic, very long song, The Greatest Show on Earth. The Greatest Show on Earth is a 24-minute long epic journey into the history of our world since the Big Bang up to today. It has several musical parts and a few intermezzos where Richard Dawkins speaks, and it's really epic, really awesome. I'm a big fan of the music, I'm a big fan of the big history, and I think that everybody should listen to this song. After a lot of listening to Nightwish and after trying mainstream heavy metal a few times, I discovered several other female-fronted metal bands which John Beek originally recommended to me back, but I didn't understand them back then. And first of them was Within Temptation, which I didn't like a lot, and I listened to it only shortly because it's almost pop music. Then I discovered Alice, which I liked more, but I wasn't a huge fan of Alice. But then I discovered Epica, and Epica completely blew my mind. The combination of the guitar riffs, which are really heavy, and the very smooth string orchestra on the background was like from a completely different universe. And I think this is the real contrast that makes the beauty of the real music. Not only this instrumental part, but also the singing was based on a very great contrast. The combination of the death metal grunts of Mark and the angelic mezzo-soprano voice of Simon Simmons is really awesome. It's also called The Beauty and the Beast, and for a reason. And not only is that they have these two great singers, they have a full choir on the background, and when they put it all together, it's full of contrast and really beautiful music. I think that the combination of the elements is really important, because when you keep listening to only one kind of sound all the time, it quickly gets boring. And it really works like this in your head, because when you have only one stimulus, you stop perceiving it more and more. But when you have this combination of two completely different stimuli, these death metal grounds of Mark and the angelic voice of Simon, it becomes really interesting, and as the song evolves, there is always something which gets your attention, and I think that this kind of music is really awesome. Their first album, The Phantom Agony, was my most favorite album of Epica, and I still think it's their best album and maybe the best album of all music ever written of all times. I don't like the cover of this album, but the music is really beautiful. And I think that all 9 tracks on this album are really awesome, really epic. It is full of beautiful music, and also the lyrics are very interesting. It is full of various philosophy, and I think that Mark really passed on a message in this album. However, when I was listening to Epica for the first time, I liked their second album, Consigned to Oblivion, more. This album has simpler songs, however these songs are still very beautiful. It is full of great orchestration, and I think that if you want to listen to Epica for the first time in your life, then Consigned to Oblivion is the best album to start with. I can't go on without mentioning their fourth album, Design Your Universe. This album is really great. The songs are more heavy but still very beautiful. Their lyrics are full of philosophy, and it is also influenced by science, especially by quantum mechanics, and I think it is really interesting. In Consigned to Oblivion, Mark started a series of songs called A New Age Dawns, and he finished this series in album Design Your Universe. And if you combine these two albums and you pick the specific songs from each of them to play a playlist of A New Age Dawns together, it is a really great experience. And at the end of listening to this playlist, I had a similar feeling as at the end of listening to Novosvětská Symphony by Antonín Dvořák. Because this video is getting too long, I will skip a lot of bands which are not so important to me, and I will tell you about my most favorite band at this moment, and this band is Wintersun. Unlike Nightwish and Epica, Wintersun can be classified as extreme metal, and you can also notice that there is no female singer here. But still, I think this music is very great and very deep, and as I listened to it more and more, I understand the music more and more, and I like it more and more. I think the music of Wintersun is very dark, but also very emotional, very sorrowful, and very dynamic. The core of their music is melodic death metal, but they combine more musical elements together, and even though they don't have a string orchestra and they don't have female singers, their music is very interesting and it sounds great to me. This is the cover of their album Time One, which I consider to be their best, and for me it's my second most favorite album of all music. This album consists of only 3 songs, however they are saved in 5 tracks because overture of the first and the last song is a separate track with its own name. The first overture is called When Time Fades Away, and it smoothly continues with the first song, The Sounds of Winter and Stars. When I play these 2 tracks together, I almost cry how beautiful it is. It starts with a very silent and very nice overture, and then you hear the gradation up to the heaviest death metal riffs and screaming, and then it gets quieter again, and it's really beautiful, and it's a really great experience to listen to them together. It is so great thanks to this genius composer Jari Menpa, who started this project on his own, and even now when he records the albums, he creates all the music on his own, only with a few helps from some other singers to create a small choir or things like this, but he really records all the tracks on his own to create the real sound which corresponds to the vision in his head perfectly. 5 weeks ago I bought their new album, The First Seasons. It is a 4-track album where every track corresponds to one season: spring, summer, autumn and winter, which somehow resembles the Vivaldi's 4 Seasons Symphony. However, this is not a classical music, this is an extreme metal, and the first and the second time I listened to it I couldn't understand the music. I thought I would not like the music, but at the end I finally understood, and it is really great. And because I can't stress how awesome it is using my poor English, I will read a short review written by some better people. The First Seasons is not just an epic metal album. It is a colossal journey into the heart of the darkest and coldest Finnish winter nights and the most beautiful glimpses of the shining midnight sun. And I think that from the heavy, authentic sound of this great album, The First Seasons, I can really feel The feeling of the lonely man who walks through the dark and cold Finnish forests every season during the year. And it is a very atmospheric music, it is a very beautiful music, and I really like it. Some people say that Jari Menpää is like Mozart of metal music, but for me he is more like Bach of metal music. I thank you for your attention, and this is all from me. If you also listen to metal, please write me into comments which metal you like and what you like about the music.